My name is Denny Tedesco, and I directed the documentary called The Wrecking Crew. It's the story of the session musicians of the '60s that did all the rock and roll in Los Angeles. They did the Beach Boys, Sinatra, Mamas and Papas, Fifth Dimension. Anything that was done in L.A., most likely these guys had a piece of it. And I started in 1996 because my dad, Tommy Tedesco, was the guitar player, and he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So I wanted to tell his story before he passed, and I jumped on it with these gentlemen.
This Wrecking Crew, it's really not it's not a formal band. It's an informal name. Um, how how did you guys get together? Did it just happen, or?
Well, we were doing a lot of demos in the beginning, in the late '50s, just the beginnings of rock and roll. We were all jazz musicians. We were playing in jazz groups, trios. I was with the Count Basie Orchestra. But there were a lot of musicians in L.A. that refused to play this new genre of rock and roll. It's filthy, nasty music. It's going to last 5 minutes. And all of a sudden, people like Brian Wilson and a lot of the people who heard us, we were doing demos. In those days, they had song pluggers. And if you were Andy Williams and you were a song plugger and you had a song for Andy, you decided to do a demo, and they would call us in. We were all nightclub musicians, and we were doing these demos. And the demos were so good, they were making masters of them. And of course, the word gets around real quick. In Hollywood, I've said this before, you're as good as your last hit. Or what have you done lately? That's the Hollywood jargon. Well, it turned out that everything we touched was turning to gold. So people were coming from Italy, from France, from all over Europe. They're all in Europe, right? And bada boom. Anyway, it was an amazing time, and we did incredible, incredible records, and it was fun. We could go in and do an album in a matter of hours, where it was most of these groups. I mean, I've talked about Gary Lewis and the Playboys. They did not play on their own records, that like so many of the other groups. Gary's the only one that swears he played the drums on his albums. But unfortunately, he didn't, and most of us know that. And he's a good guy. I worked for his dad, too. It's a whole nother story. You got in the nightclub business, right?
I did.
How are you guys different than the ones who came before you? I mean, can you explain?
There was none before us. Not playing a rock and roll. As a matter of fact, even in the film, they'll point out that these guys were all the suits guys. You know, they didn't want to have anything to do with us. They didn't smoke. They didn't wear jeans. You know, they were more of the movie call people, and because of that they did the records. You know, and they were a different genre. You couldn't tell them what to do. You could tell us what to do. We didn't get embarrassed. If you didn't like something, we would change it for you. That's because we all come from an improvising world, playing jazz, doing all that. So we knew how to finagle it. We knew how to move it around to make it right. And once the word got out that we were making hit records, that's all it took. You do 2 hit records in a row, and you're the lucky charm. And everybody wants you, you know. So who was on that date? Let's get those guys. You work for Phil Spector, everybody else wants you to do it. You work for Brian Wilson, everybody else wants you, you know. And Jimmy Bowen jumped all over us right away, and because he was the head at Liberty at one point, and then at Warner Brothers Reprise, you were working constantly, and all the other producers would say, wow, they're making the hit records, we better get in that program. And thank God for us that we were that program. And I wish I could say I was the only piano player. There was 6 or 7 of us, you know, that any one of us could have done each other's job, you know.
How many own nightclubs?
Well, I always liked playing live, and I always worked in nightclubs. And the club owners were going to kill me because I wasn't there. I was doing a studio date, and I'd send a substitute piano player. So I got my own club. As a matter of fact, one year, I paid $6,200 in substitute piano players for subbing for me at Sherry's, a club at Sunset and Crescent Heights. And those piano players were Mike Melvoin, Leon Russell, Pete Jolly, Bruce Johnston, who was now one of the Beach Boys. These guys would come in and sub for me. So it was always good music.